Okay, this one is just quite on my fault. But I feel like, me personally, right? I'm a huge Kanye fan. And I'm not even afraid to admit that, right? Even as like someone who's politically left, right? I think it's okay to be a Kanye fan. And I'm gonna explain why, right? Because Kanye, you can't take Kanye at face value. And that's a problem, like that's a thing I see a lot of people do, is they try and take Kanye and just take what he's saying at face value. And it's never that. And I think The Life of Pablo is one of the best examples. And it's one of my personal favorite albums, right? And The Life of Pablo, I think the whole idea there is that there's so many sides to Kanye. And the whole album is like this wonderful contrast between, Pablo Picasso, the artist and the man, and Pablo Escobar, the hedonist drug dealer, and also like Saint Pablo and this kind of divine figure. And it's a summation of the human experience. And I think that's what Kanye is overall, is he's very human. And that's why I think his art is so undervalued, because a lot of times today, I think people want to hear good sounding art. They want to hear like, oh, I like this beat and I like this track. But a lot of times I feel like some of the music lacks like a lot of substance. And it's even artists that I like. For example, even like, and this is a hot take, and this is not a diss, right? I love this artist, one of my favorite artists of all time, Tyler, the Creator, right? He has a very specific structure, and the music sounds great. And yes, there is meaning. I feel like it's, maybe he's a bad example. I probably should have said that. But I do feel like we tend to like artists who feed into one very specific aspect at a time rather than a more broad aspect. And I think that, every album, every project, and also his entire discography, Kanye's got a great encapsulation of what it is to exist. And people see him as kind of a pop culture figure rather than an artist. And I feel like we've lost a lot of track of that, which is that you can't expect an artist to be like a normal person. And because of that, or like normal in a very traditional sense, like a person who just lives their life, like day in and day out, does the same stuff every day. I think more of us need to live like artists, because first off, it's more human. And you get a much better experience when you live and you look for the beauty and you make beauty of your own in life. And I think a lot of artists, even while they may lack substance, have a great understanding on that. But Kanye, there's just so much substance to it. And I feel like that's really valuable. And I think I really love Kanye on this very deep emotional level, because, and he talks about it in his songs, he says, if you listen to my music, it's the code to self-esteem. And it really is, because all that he talks about is being human and navigating your way through life. That's all his artwork, not all his artwork has ever been, but that's a huge theme in his artwork. And I want to make it clear, like I said, all his artwork. I meant that in the sense that all of his artwork has that. A lot of his music's very deep, it's very good, but as an overall theme, it's about navigating a person's life and all the challenges that come with that, and the challenges of being human. And people talk about his controversial statements. As someone who does speak rashly a lot of the time too, you can be placed in difficult situations like that, where you say something and you mean something very genuine and heartfelt, but when you feel so deeply about certain topics, it can be very difficult to get that across. And I think that happens with Kanye pretty frequently. But if you look at him historically, he's incredible about, after the fact, telling us what he meant. And it may take time because it's frustrating to not have people understand your vision. But if you look at it, especially when he talks about like the industry and the corruption in the industry, he goes on these interviews and sometimes he makes controversial statements, but afterwards he's always very well spoken about what he really meant and what the idea behind his statement was. And online, a lot of the times I see this discourse which is like, oh, the difference between Ye and Kanye West. And it's like, oh, that's not Kanye anymore. It is Kanye. And it's always been Kanye. And if you don't appreciate the fact that his art is an extension of, living on planet Earth and existing, and that his art reflects what he's experienced in his existence, and that it's still the same person, I think you're not a real fan of Kanye, first off, at all. If you can't appreciate both his, like, what he's doing now and what he did in the past. And you can admit when there's hiccups in art, and Kanye has hiccups, but you can't do this disingenuous thing and be like, oh, I liked what Kanye did back then, but not anything he's done since. I think that you should just say you're not a fan at that point. You can say, oh yeah, I liked some of his stuff. You can say that, but you can't have this like half in, half out stance where you're like, oh, I loved old Kanye, because the line keeps shifting. And I think you have to recognize an artist and say that is an artist. And if you disagree with that perspective and you think an artist can just keep making the same kind of music over and over again and never contribute anything philosophically to a space, I think you don't have an avid appreciation of art as a general concept. Because if you were to look at me and be like, some of the most influential artists ever, like if you said, oh, Beethoven, if you like Beethoven, you don't do that thing where you're like, oh, I like Beethoven's music, but I don't like him as a person. You recognize that that's an artist, and you say, yes, he may be different. Yes, he may live his own lifestyle how he wants, but he made impeccable art and he changed the world. It's the same thing with Van Gogh. Like people say, oh, Van Gogh, he was misunderstood, he was tortured. Y'all would have said the same thing about Kanye if he died, but he didn't, and he's still here. And all these famous artists, they don't live the measured, calculated lives that like so many people do. And I think, and it's in Kanye's music too, you should try and live more like an artist and try and live in the present and really live life, because you only get one. It says you've only got 100 years. Live more like an artist. And to do that, you have to appreciate other people as artists and understand that the things that they do are direct reflections of their lived experience and reinterpretations of that experience into the art that is living life every day. And anyone influential has done that, and they've transformed their output into a form of art. That's what Kanye talks about when he says like Walt Disney. He says, I'm Walt Disney, I'm Nike, I'm Da Vinci. He says all that stuff because he emulates the style in which they lived their lives, I think. And more people need to do that. And a key step towards doing that is making sure everybody understands and is on the same page that we're all doing art and living life in a way where we're seeking to live it and experience it instead of just let it happen and sit idly by. And even if you don't work an extravagant job, you can do that, especially in the United States. I mean, obviously we need to bring that ability to do that to every person, but if you live in a privileged country, Even if you work a boring desk job, you can find that value and live every day with intention. And that's what Kanye's music is all about. It's all about feeling what you're feeling and doing something with it and doing something about it. And you might not like everything he does about what he's experienced, but it is a byproduct of his experience. And you have to acknowledge that regardless of your personal opinion, that's an artist right there, and an incredible one who's been making incredible music regardless of political standing throughout the past 20 years, more than that, for ages. And people talk about Kanye's political stance. I personally don't really see the issue. He's evidently a person who responds to the information he sees and does so wisely, and he forms a lot of nuanced takes. Obviously, everyone has unsavory takes. You can't get rid of that. But what you can acknowledge is that he is innately, like, he's living life, and more people need to do that.